At the geometric center of your brain, nestled between the two hemispheres, there is a small structure about the size of a grain of rice, shaped like a pine cone, and for thousands of years it has been at the center of one of the most persistent mysteries in human history. The ancient Egyptians depicted it prominently in their sacred art. The Vedic tradition identified it as the seat of the third eye, the Ajna chakra, the center of inner vision and higher perception. The Taoists called it the crystal palace, the seat of spiritual luminosity. Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, called it the seat of the soul. And modern neuroscience, while cautious about the more extraordinary claims, has confirmed that this tiny structure, the pineal gland, produces compounds that are found in no other organ in the human body, compounds that alter consciousness in ways that science is only beginning to understand. Tonight, we are going to explore the pineal gland, not through superstition, not through conspiracy, but through the best available combination of ancient wisdom and modern science. We are going to look at what the ancient traditions actually claimed about this structure, and why those claims were taken so seriously by some of the greatest minds in human history. We are going to examine what modern neuroscience has actually discovered about the pineal gland and its function, and we are going to explore what all of this means for your own inner development, because the pineal gland is not merely an interesting anatomical curiosity. It is, according to traditions spanning thousands of years, the physical correlate of a capacity that every human being possesses, the capacity for direct inner seeing, for perception that goes beyond the five ordinary senses, for contact with dimensions of reality that ordinary consciousness cannot reach. This capacity has been called many things. The third eye, inner vision, spiritual sight, higher perception, and whether you understand it literally or metaphorically, the traditions are unanimous. It can be developed, it can be opened, and when it is, nothing looks the same again. Let us begin with what modern science actually knows about the pineal gland. The pineal gland is a small endocrine gland located at the center of the brain, between the two cerebral hemispheres. Unlike most of the brain, it is not protected by the blood-brain barrier. It has direct access to the bloodstream, and it is one of the most highly vascularized organs in the body, meaning it receives an extraordinary volume of blood flow relative to its size. Its primary known function is the production of melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone that regulates the sleep-wake cycle. Its production is triggered by darkness and suppressed by light. This is why exposure to artificial light at night disrupts sleep. It suppresses melatonin production and confuses the biological clock. The pineal gland produces melatonin in response to light signals received from the retina. In this sense, the pineal gland is literally a light-sensitive organ, an eye, not in the metaphorical sense, in a direct functional sense. It responds to light, it processes information about light, and in many simpler animals, it actually contains photoreceptor cells similar to those in the retina, in fish and frogs and lizards. The pineal gland sits just beneath the skin of the skull and functions as a literal third eye, detecting light directly, regulating behavior based on that detection in mammals, including humans. The pineal gland has been internalized. It no longer sits at the surface. It no longer detects light directly. but it still responds to light signals transmitted from the retina through a specific neural pathway, and it retains the photoreceptor cells. Vestigial, largely non-functional in the ordinary sense, but present, this extraordinary structure that was once a literal eye sits at the center of the human brain. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting. In 1990, a chemist and pharmacologist named Rick Strassman began a series of studies that would eventually lead to one of the most controversial books in the history of neuroscience. Strassman had been studying melatonin, but his interest shifted to another compound that he noticed shared structural similarities with melatonin, dimethyltryptamine, DMT. DMT is a naturally occurring compound found throughout the natural world, in plants, in animals, in the human body. It belongs to the tryptamine family, the same family as serotonin and melatonin. And it produces, when it enters the brain in sufficient concentrations, some of the most profound alterations of consciousness ever documented by science. Strassman conducted the first approved human research on DMT in decades, and what his subjects reported was extraordinary. Encounters with what felt like other dimensions of reality, contact with presences that seemed intelligent and intentional, experiences of a light so intense and so beautiful that words consistently failed to describe it, a sense of contact with something fundamental, something that felt more real than ordinary reality, not like a drug experience, like an encounter. Strassman published his findings in a book called DMT, the spirit molecule, and his central hypothesis, which remains controversial but scientifically interesting, was that the pineal gland, under specific conditions, may produce or concentrate DMT, particularly at moments of extreme physiological significance, at birth, at death, in deep meditation, in near-death experiences, in the threshold states between sleep and waking. The evidence for this hypothesis is not conclusive. The research is ongoing, but it provides a potential biological framework for understanding experiences that contemplatives and mystics have been reporting for thousands of years. The light that meditators describe, the sense of contact with another dimension, the feeling of profound expansion and clarity that arises in deep meditative states. All of these experiences may have a specific neurochemical correlate located in the tiny pinecone-shaped gland at the center of the brain. Now let us look at what the ancient traditions actually claimed about this structure. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus. This symbol appears throughout Egyptian sacred art and architecture. It depicts a stylized eye, often with distinctive markings, that some researchers have argued correspond to a cross-section of the human brain, with the pineal gland prominently featured. Whether or not this interpretation is correct, the Eye of Horus was understood by the Egyptians as a symbol of protection, healing, and divine vision. The capacity to see what ordinary eyes cannot see, to perceive the invisible dimensions of reality. And this capacity was understood as something that could be cultivated through specific initiatic practices, through the long and rigorous training of the Egyptian mystery schools. The Vedic tradition of India has perhaps the most developed understanding of the third eye and its development. The Ajna chakra, located at the center of the forehead, just behind the space between the eyebrows, is described as the seat of higher perception, the center of intuition, of inner vision, of direct knowing. The Vedic tradition describes 6 chakras below the ajna, and one above it. The ajna is the second highest, the center through which the individual consciousness begins to open to the transpersonal, to dimensions of awareness that go beyond the personal self. And the Vedic practices for opening the ajna are highly developed, specific meditation techniques, specific breathing practices, specific dietary guidelines, specific lifestyle recommendations, all oriented towards supporting the development of this center of higher perception. The Taoist tradition calls the pineal gland area the crystal palace, and the practices of Taoist inner alchemy include specific techniques for activating this center. Techniques involving the circulation of subtle energy through specific pathways in the body that the Taoist tradition maps in extraordinary detail. The crystal palace, when activated through these practices, is described as producing a quality of inner light, a luminosity that is directly perceived in deep meditative states, and that the Taoist masters understood as the activation of the higher perceptual capacity that the physical pineal gland represents. Now let me talk about something practical, because understanding the pineal gland and its role in higher perception is one thing. Actually, developing that capacity is another. The ancient traditions were clear on one point. The opening of the third eye, the development of higher inner perception, is not something that happens automatically. It is not guaranteed by simply knowing about the pineal gland. It requires practice, sustained, disciplined, patient practice, applied consistently over time. The first and most important practice is the purification of the physical body, because the pineal gland, the physical correlate of the third eye, is unusually sensitive to the chemical environment of the body. Modern research has confirmed that the pineal gland tends to calcify over time, a process called pineal calcification, in which calcium phosphate deposits accumulate in the gland and gradually reduce its functional capacity. By the age of 17, in most people, calcification is already detectable. By middle age, it is common, and the factors that accelerate calcification include fluoride exposure, high sugar consumption, chronic stress, and lack of exposure to natural darkness. This does not mean the pineal gland stops functioning, but it may mean that its more subtle functions, including any role it plays in higher perception, are diminished. The ancient traditions did not know about calcification, but they did understand that the physical body needed to be purified and cared for as a prerequisite for the development of higher perception. Their dietary recommendations, their fasting practices, their guidelines around sleep and light exposure all served to create the physical conditions in which the more subtle capacities could develop. Modern research suggests that some of these practices may have been specifically beneficial for pineal gland health: exposure to natural light and darkness, reduction of processed foods and refined sugars, regular periods of fasting, reduction of chronic stress through meditation and contemplative practice. These are not exotic recommendations. They are the foundations of physical health. And they are also, according to both ancient tradition and emerging science, supportive of the more subtle capacities that the pineal gland may facilitate. The second practice is meditation, specifically the practice of concentration applied to the ajna center, the point between the eyebrows. This practice is found in virtually every tradition that works with the development of higher perception. The technique is straightforward. Sit in your usual meditation posture, close your eyes, and bring your attention to the space between your eyebrows, not to a point on the surface of the skin, but to the space just behind that point, the interior space, and simply rest your attention there, gently, without strain, without forcing, simply holding the attention at this point, and noticing whatever arises. You may notice nothing at first, a slight pressure, a tingling, the ordinary wandering of the mind. This is fine. The practice is the same as any concentration practice. Notice when the attention wanders and return again and again. Over weeks and months of consistent practice, practitioners report increasing sensitivity in this area, a quality of warmth or pressure, sometimes a subtle luminosity, a sense of increasing clarity and perception. These are the early signs of the development the traditions describe, not dramatic visions, not supernatural experiences, simply an increasing sensitivity, a gradual opening of a capacity that was always present, but largely dormant. The third practice is darkness. The ancient traditions almost universally recognized the importance of darkness for inner development, not just the darkness of sleep, but deliberate periods of darkness, in which the visual system is completely at rest, and the inner faculties can become more prominent. Some traditions used extended periods of darkness as a specific initiatic practice, days or weeks in complete darkness, during which practitioners reported the arising of inner light, inner vision, direct perception of dimensions of reality, not accessible in ordinary waking consciousness. You do not need to undertake extended darkness retreats, but even the simple practice of spending more time in genuine darkness, reducing artificial light in the evenings, allowing the eyes to rest in darkness before sleep. This supports the natural function of the pineal gland and may support the development of the more subtle capacities that the ancient traditions associated with it. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because this exploration continues, video by video. We are following the evidence, both ancient and modern, toward a fuller understanding of what human consciousness actually is and what it is actually capable of. Until next time, care for the center, practice the stillness, welcome the darkness, and open to the possibility that there is more to seeing than the eyes have ever shown you. I want to go deeper into something that I touched on earlier but did not fully develop, the relationship between the pineal gland and the experience of death. Because this is where the ancient traditions and the emerging science converge in the most extraordinary way. In virtually every tradition that has explored the nature of consciousness, the moment of death has been described as an experience of light. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, one of the most detailed maps of the after-death experience ever produced by any civilization, describes what it calls the clear light of the Dharmata, a brilliant, luminous, all-pervading light that arises at the moment of death, and that, if recognized for what it is, represents the opportunity for liberation, for the direct recognition of the nature of mind itself. The Tibetan tradition spent centuries developing practices specifically designed to prepare practitioners to recognize this light at the moment of death. to not be overwhelmed by its intensity, to not flee from it in confusion, but to rest in it, to recognize it, to merge with it, because the clear light, they taught, is not something foreign or alien. It is the nature of your own awareness, always present, always available, but ordinarily obscured by the activity of the ordinary mind. Death, in the Tibetan understanding, is the moment when that obscuring activity ceases, and the fundamental luminosity of awareness itself becomes directly visible. The Islamic tradition describes the moment of death as the meeting with the divine light. The Christian mystical tradition speaks of the beatific vision, the direct sight of God that awaits the soul after death. The ancient Egyptian tradition describes the journey through the duat, the hidden realm, as culminating in an encounter with Ra, the divine light itself. Different frameworks, the same pointing. At the moment of death, something happens with consciousness and light. Something so consistent across traditions that it demands serious attention. And Rick Strassman's hypothesis about the pineal gland and DMT offers a potential biological mechanism. If the pineal gland produces or concentrates DMT, and if this production spikes at specific moments of physiological extremity, including the moment of death, then the extraordinary experiences reported by near-death experiencers, the tunnel of light, the feeling of profound love and peace, the encounter with presences, the life review, the sense of contact with something infinite, may have a specific neurochemical correlate, the pineal gland, flooding the brain with a compound that produces experiences remarkably consistent with what the ancient traditions described as the experience of death and beyond. This does not reduce these experiences to mere chemistry. It does not explain them away, because the question of why these specific chemicals produce these specific experiences of light, of love, of infinite awareness, is itself one of the deepest questions in all of science. What is the relationship between a molecule and the experience of the infinite? This question, like the hard problem of consciousness, cannot be answered by chemistry alone. It points beyond chemistry, toward the recognition that consciousness is not merely a product of the brain, but that the brain, including the pineal gland, is an instrument, a receiver, a transducer, that, under specific conditions, can be tuned to receive what is always already present, the infinite awareness, the divine light, the ground of being that the mystics have always pointed at, and that the pineal gland, in its extraordinary sensitivity, its unusual chemistry, its ancient history as a literal eye, may be the physical doorway through which that recognition enters, the human experience. Let me now talk about something that is rarely discussed. In conversations about the pineal gland, the role of sound, specifically the use of specific frequencies of sound, to influence the pineal gland. The ancient traditions understood the power of sound in ways that modern science is only beginning to explore. The Vedic tradition developed an entire science of sound called Nada Yoga, the understanding that specific sounds and frequencies have direct effects on the subtle body, including the energy centers, including the Ajna chakra. The mantras used in Vedic practice are not arbitrary. They are specific sonic frequencies, chosen for their resonance with specific energy centers. The bija mantra for the Ajna chakra is Aum, or Om. the most fundamental of all Sanskrit mantras. The sound that the tradition says represents the original vibration of the universe, the sound from which all other sounds emerge. When chanted with awareness and intention, the Om mantra is said to resonate directly with the Ajna center, to stimulate it, to activate it, to support the development of inner vision. Modern research has begun to explore the effects of specific frequencies on the brain. The work of researchers studying binaural beats, frequencies slightly different in each ear, that the brain reconciles by producing a third frequency, has shown measurable effects on brainwave states. Specific frequencies in the theta range, 4 to 7 Hz, produce brain states associated with deep meditation, hypnagogia, and heightened creativity. And some researchers have specifically explored whether certain frequencies may influence the pineal gland through its unusual sensitivity to electromagnetic fields and vibration. The research is preliminary, but it is consistent with what the ancient traditions discovered through direct observation over thousands of years of practice. Sound matters, specific sounds matter, and the deliberate use of sound as a tool for inner development, including the development of higher perception, is one of the oldest and most widespread practices in the history of human spirituality. The practice I want to offer you here is simple. Find a quiet place, sit in your meditation posture, close your eyes, and begin to chant Om, not quietly, not in your head. Actually vocalize it. Let the sound fill the room. Feel it resonating in the chest, in the throat, in the skull. And as you chant, bring your attention gently to the space between your eyebrows, the Ajna center, and simply notice what you feel there. As the sound resonates through the body, do this for 10 minutes and notice what changes in the quality of your awareness, in the sensitivity of your inner perception, in the clarity of what you see. With the eyes that are not physical eyes, this practice, combined with the concentration practice and the physical purification and the embrace of natural darkness, constitutes the beginning of a genuine path of third eye development, not dramatic, not exotic, but real, and available to anyone willing to practice consistently. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because this exploration continues. We are following the thread of ancient wisdom through the territory of modern science and back again, always arriving at the same recognition that human consciousness is far more extraordinary than ordinary life suggests, that the capacities sleeping in you are not fantasy. They are real, documented, mapped, transmitted across thousands of years of human experience, and they are waiting for your willingness to develop them. Until next time, care for the center, practice the stillness, sound the Om, welcome the darkness, and open, gradually, patiently, consistently, to the seeing that goes beyond sight, the eye that was always there, at the center of everything, waiting only for you to remember how to open it. Before we truly close tonight, I want to address something honestly. The claims made about the pineal gland in popular spiritual culture are often exaggerated, and I think it is important to be honest about what we actually know and what remains uncertain. What we know with confidence: the pineal gland is real. It produces melatonin. It is sensitive to light. It calcifies over time in most humans, and it has been the object of fascination in spiritual traditions across the world for thousands of years. What is scientifically uncertain: whether the pineal gland produces DMT in humans in quantities sufficient to affect consciousness is not established. The evidence is suggestive, but not conclusive. Whether specific meditation practices directly activate the pineal gland in the ways described by ancient traditions has not been rigorously studied. Whether the third eye experiences reported by meditators have a specific pineal gland correlate is an interesting hypothesis, not a demonstrated fact. I share this not to diminish the teaching, but because I think genuine spiritual inquiry requires honesty. The ancient traditions did not base their understanding of the third eye on anatomy. They based it on direct experience, on thousands of years of careful inner observation, on the consistent reports of practitioners who had developed genuine contemplative depth. And those reports are real. The experiences are real. The development of inner perception is real. Whether the pineal gland is the physical mechanism, or whether that relationship is more complex or metaphorical, does not change the reality of the experiences themselves, does not change the value of the practices, does not change the fact that human beings, through sustained contemplative practice, develop capacities of perception and knowing that go beyond what the ordinary senses provide. This is documented. This is consistent. This is real. The pineal gland may be the physical doorway, or it may be a pointer, a symbol in physical form of a capacity that is ultimately not physical at all. Either way, the invitation is the same. Develop the practices, cultivate the stillness, support the physical conditions for inner development, and discover for yourself what arises, not because someone told you it would, but because you had the patience and the courage to actually look with the eye that is not made of flesh, with the seeing that is not of this world, with the awareness that was here before the brain was formed, and that will be here long after it is gone. This is the third eye, not a gland, awareness itself, and it is already open. It has always been open. You are already seeing with it right now in this moment. The only question is whether you recognize it. Subscribe to Sacred Flame because this recognition deepens with every video. Until next time, look inward, not with effort, not with strain. Simply rest as awareness and notice that the seeing is already happening, that it was never absent, that the eye was never closed. Let me take you into something that I think is essential, and that is rarely discussed in conversations about the pineal gland, the relationship between the pineal gland and the experience of time. Because one of the most consistent reports from people who have had profound experiences associated with this center, whether through deep meditation, through near-death experiences, or through other means, is a profound alteration in the experience of time. The ordinary sense of time passing, of one moment following another in sequence, simply stops. And what replaces it is something that experiencers consistently struggle to describe, a sense of timelessness, of all moments existing simultaneously, of past and future collapsing into a single eternal now. The Tibetan tradition describes this as the recognition of the timeless nature of Rigpa, the natural state of awareness, which is not in time, but prior to it. The Hindu tradition describes it as the recognition of the eternal present, the moment in which Brahman is always already present. The mystic traditions of every culture have described moments of what can only be called temporal dissolution, the falling away of the ordinary sense. That time is flowing from past through present into future, and the arising of something that can only be described as eternal. Not endless time, not time stretching into infinity, but the absence of time altogether. The presence of something that was here before time began, and that will be here after time ends. Modern research on meditation and altered states of consciousness has documented significant alterations in the subjective experience of time, associated with deep meditative states. Experienced meditators report that sessions that lasted an hour felt like moments, or that moments felt like hours. The ordinary clock time sense of duration becomes highly malleable in deep practice, and some researchers have speculated that the pineal gland, with its role in regulating circadian rhythms, the body's internal clock, may be involved in this temporal dissolution, that the same gland that regulates our ordinary sense of time may also be involved in the experiences of timelessness, that meditators and mystics have consistently reported. This is speculation, but it is interesting speculation, and it points at something important. The ordinary experience of time, the sense of being carried along in a current, from past through present into future, is not the only way consciousness can relate to time. It is the default mode, the habitual way, the mode that ordinary waking consciousness imposes on experience. But there is another mode, a mode in which time is not a river you are being carried along in, but an ocean you are floating in which all moments are present simultaneously, and the awareness that knows them is itself outside time. This mode, this timeless quality of awareness, is what the traditions are pointing at when they speak of the eternal now, and the practices that develop the third eye, the practices of stillness, of concentration, of inner silence, also tend to develop the capacity for this timeless awareness, not because they stop the clock, but because they develop the capacity to step back from identification with the ordinary time-bound mind and to rest in the awareness that is prior to time. Let me also explore something about the relationship between the pineal gland and what the ancient traditions called vision. Not physical vision, not the seeing of the eyes, but the capacity for what might be called prophetic seeing, the perception of what is not yet manifest, of what is coming into being, of possibilities that have not yet taken form in the physical world. This capacity, which the traditions called prophecy, or clairvoyance, or second sight, has been reported across virtually every culture in human history. Not always accurately, not always reliably, but consistently enough that it demands serious consideration. The ancient Egyptian tradition had a sophisticated understanding of this. The seers, the prophets, the oracles were understood as individuals in whom the inner eye had been developed to an unusual degree, who could perceive dimensions of reality that ordinary consciousness could not access. The Vedic tradition describes various siddhis, spiritual powers, that arise as byproducts of advanced contemplative development. Among these, the ability to perceive what is happening at a distance, or what is about to happen, is described in considerable detail. The Sufi tradition speaks of kashf, the unveiling in which the veils that ordinarily obscure the deeper dimensions of reality are temporarily lifted. and the practitioner perceives things that ordinary consciousness cannot see. These traditions are not describing magic. They are describing the natural development of perceptual capacities that are latent in every human being. Capacities that develop when the conditions that support their development are cultivated. Stillness, purity, sustained practice, and the gradual opening of the inner eye, the pineal gland, as the physical correlate of this inner eye, may be involved in these capacities, or it may not. The honest answer is that we do not know, but the traditions that described these capacities and developed practices for cultivating them were not operating in ignorance. They were working from thousands of years of careful, direct observation, and their observations deserve serious consideration, even when they challenge the boundaries of what modern science has yet been able to measure. Let me close with something practical, a complete practice protocol for third eye development, drawing on the best of what the ancient traditions offer and on what modern understanding confirms. Morning practice. Upon waking, before looking at your phone, before engaging with the day, spend 5 minutes in complete stillness, sitting comfortably, eyes closed, attention resting gently at the ajna center, the space between and behind the eyebrows, simply present with whatever arises. This morning stillness, before the ordinary mind has fully activated, is one of the most valuable windows for inner work, midday practice, at some point during the day. Take 3 minutes, step outside if possible, let your eyes rest on the horizon or the sky, not staring, simply resting, and bring your awareness to the ajna center. Feel the quality of presence there. This brief midday pause maintains the connection with the inner work. Across the busyness of the day, evening practice in the hour before sleep. Reduce artificial light as much as possible. Spend 10 minutes in the Om chanting practice. With attention at the Ajna center, feel the resonance, notice the sensitivity, then spend 10 minutes in the concentration practice, resting attention gently at the center, and finally, set an intention for the night, a simple, sincere aspiration for clarity, for insight, for deeper opening, then sleep with the intention still held lightly in the background of consciousness. Weekly practice, once a week, spend 30 minutes to an hour in complete darkness and silence. No phone, no light, no stimulation, simply sitting, allowing the visual system to rest completely and noticing what arises in the inner visual field, the images, the qualities of light, the sensations at the ajna center, without judgment, without grasping, simply observing. This weekly darkness practice is one of the most direct and powerful of all the pineal gland development practices, because darkness is the natural condition in which this center becomes most active, in which the inner eye has the best conditions for opening, done consistently, over months and years of genuine commitment. This protocol will produce results, not dramatic or sudden, but real. A gradual deepening of inner sensitivity, a growing capacity for intuitive knowing, a development of the quality of perception. That goes beyond what the physical senses can provide, the opening, gradual and real, of the eye that was always there. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because this work continues, video by video, practice by practice, until next time. Begin the protocol, be patient, and trust what the ancient traditions and the emerging science both point toward, that you are more capable of seeing than you have ever been told, and the eye through which that seeing happens is already there, waiting only for your attention, your practice, your patient and sincere commitment to the inner work that transforms everything. I want to leave you with something that ties all of this together, something that goes beyond the pineal gland, beyond the science, beyond the ancient traditions, to the most fundamental question of all. Why does any of this matter? Why should you spend time developing inner perception? Why cultivate the third eye? Why pursue capacities that most of the world does not believe in? And that even those who believe in them rarely develop to any significant degree? The answer, at the deepest level, is not about gaining powers. It is not about seeing the future, or perceiving hidden dimensions, or having extraordinary experiences. It is about this. The more clearly you can see, the more free you become, because most of the suffering in human life is a result of not seeing clearly, of seeing through the distorted lens, of unexamined beliefs, unconscious fears, inherited assumptions, and the constant filtering of experience through the narrow aperture of the conditioned mind. When perception deepens, when the inner eye begins to open, what you see with greater clarity is the nature of your own mind, the patterns, the habits, the automatic reactions, the ways in which ordinary consciousness mistakes the costume for the being. And in that clearer seeing, something loosens, the grip of the patterns relaxes, the identification with the limited self softens, and a larger, freer, more genuine way of being becomes available. This is the real gift of third eye development. Not powers, not extraordinary experiences, not access to hidden information, but clarity. The clarity that comes when the inner eye is sufficiently open to see what is actually here, what you actually are, what reality actually is. This clarity is what every genuine spiritual tradition has been pointing toward since the very beginning of the human search for understanding. And the pineal gland, this tiny structure at the center of the brain, with its ancient history as a literal eye, its extraordinary chemistry, its sensitivity to light and darkness, may be the physical pointer toward the most important capacity you possess, the capacity to see clearly from the inside, with the eye that is not made of flesh, with the awareness that is prior to the body, with the knowing that knows, without itself being known. This is the third eye. This is what the ancient traditions were pointing at. This is what the science, in its most honest and careful form, is beginning to approach, and it is available to you, not in some distant future, not after years of perfect practice, but right now, in this moment, in the simple act of turning the attention inward and noticing what is already here, already seeing, already knowing, already aware. The eye that never closes is already open. Subscribe to Sacred Flame and continue this journey with us. Until next time, look inward, see clearly, and know that the seeing itself is the freedom you are looking for.